Okay, so I wanted to welcome everybody to the Resident and Family Support Council. I'll go ahead and turn on my video as well so everybody can see me. My name is Lee Moriarty, and excuse me, I am the Deputy State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. Excuse me. And I want to welcome everybody to the Resident and Family Support Council. We have these meetings every other week at 3 o'clock. Actually on the second and the fourth Tuesday of the month. I'm sorry, I misspoke. On the second and the fourth Tuesday of the month at 3 o'clock. And one of the things I want to make you aware of is it's always the same link to get into the meetings. So if for any reason you can't find the link, you can go back to this original one that got you in today, and you can click on that at 3, even before 3 o'clock, and you can get directly into the meeting. So I want to make everybody aware of that. We tried to make it as easy as we could for people to be able to access these meetings. The purpose of these meetings is they're really designed to help bring together those who live in long-term care, have a loved one in long-term care, actually the facilities themselves, and the Ombudsman program to bring us all together so that we can all hear the same information, learn from each other, and make sure that we're all vested in that quality of care and quality of life for those who live or love somebody in long-term care. I do want to ask everybody if you could please type your zip code into the chat box, because we do make sure that that's how we track where people are attending from throughout the state. So I want to make sure that everybody does that as well. There will be time for question and answer. I'm actually going to be talking about this topic today, resident councils. What are they for and what should they look like? I'm curious. How many people here, if you know where the hand raising option is, or even if you don't, you could just even just raise your hand physically. How many people have been to a resident council meeting before? Anybody? Raise your hand if you have been. I'm scrolling through general public to see if anybody has been. I'm seeing a couple. I just saw one hand. I'm seeing the thumbs up. Okay, I'm seeing just a couple of people. Okay, just a couple of people have been to a resident council meeting, and there may be more, but we just couldn't figure out how to quite get that operated. So I want to make sure that everybody understands what a resident council meeting really is all about. Resident council meetings, obviously, they benefit the resident. They benefit the resident greatly because the council meeting becomes a mechanism for people to be able to understand what is happening in the building. I'm sorry, I think I just lost the slide. There we go. It becomes an opportunity for people to be able to bring concerns, to learn what's happening in the facility, and to bring us together better as a community. So that's why the resident benefits. It makes people feel more involved in where they live and that they have a voice to what's going on. Families benefit from a resident council meeting because they know that through these meetings, it gives their loved one the opportunity to be able to speak and say what they want to say in their home. And so it makes families have a little bit more security around that feeling that where their loved one lives. So it helps families in that sense of security and knowing that the facility wants to listen to what their loved one has to say. Next week, we will be talking, or next meeting, we will be talking about family councils and what those can look like and why you may want to think about having those. The administrator benefits from resident council meetings for a variety of reasons. This gives the administrator the opportunity to be able to hear from the residents directly in a collective manner. Many times administrators hear from residents singly about things that are a concern to them alone. But when that resident council meeting is done and it's done well, it allows that opportunity for the administrator to really gain a deeper understanding about how the residents are feeling about things that are happening in the building that they oversee, and understanding that it's their home, the people who live their home, and it helps that administrator be able to do better for those people who live there. And then the staff in general benefit because it also gives that staff a sense of security that the people that they're caring for have that opportunity to be able to voice what they need to voice in order to make sure that their care needs are being met. So it can be resident council meetings are very beneficial for the entire facility. So there are requirements in regards to resident council meetings. When it comes to resident council meetings, there are state requirements that actually state the exact same thing verbatim in those regulations for skilled, which is also what people might refer to as a rehab facility, for intermediate care facilities, for Illinois veterans homes, for intermediate care for the developmentally disabled, for the medically complex for the developmentally disabled. Those are people who are under 22. And sheltered care is almost the same, except for there's one little bit of a difference there. And then specialized mental health rehab facilities, those facilities that specialize in the care for people that have mental health issues, they refer to them as consumer support councils. It's not required to have a resident council in Illinois for assisted living nor for supportive living. It can be a really good best practice, but it's not required. So I do want to make sure that everybody understands that. We're not going to go deep into the regulations, but I will be dropping into the chat box at the end of this conversation those regulations so that you can access the regulations for all of these. So what does it say in regards? What does the state basically say in regards to resident council? Or I'm sorry, what does the federal government say in regards to resident council meetings? This is also a requirement under the federal guidelines for nursing homes. Of those entities that were just previously discussed, nursing homes are the only ones that have that federal regulation that's tied to the resident council group. So what does it say? It says that the resident has the right to organize and participate in resident groups in the facility. So the residents have this right to do this. And that the facility must provide a resident or family group, if one exists, with private space and take reasonable steps with the approval of the group to make residents and family members aware of upcoming meetings in a timely manner. It also states that staff, visitors, or other guests may attend resident groups or family meetings only at the respective group's invitation. So family members can only go to resident groups if they are invited, and visitors and other guests may only, including staff, can only attend resident council meetings if they are invited to that meeting. That includes everybody that works in that building, and that includes all guests that want to attend that meeting. They must be invited by the resident group. We're going to talk more in detail about these things through the course of this conversation. The facility must provide a designated staff person who is approved by the resident or family group and the facility and who's responsible for providing assistance and responding to written requests that result from the group meeting. Many times this is referred to as the facility liaison because that's the way it's discussed in the state regulations. So the facility must have a person, one of their staff members, who oversee that group, who are that designated staff person, that liaison, and they are there to provide assistance and respond to the written requests from that group. That doesn't mean that they attend that meeting still. They are still under that same guidance above, that they must be invited to attend that meeting. The facility must consider the views of a resident or family group and act promptly upon the grievances and recommendations of such group concerning issues of residents' care and life in the facility. So the facility must respond back to any concerns that are brought up during that meeting. And again, we'll talk about this more. And the facility must be able to demonstrate their response and their rationale for the response. And also, it's important to note that this should not be construed to mean that the facility must implement as recommended every request of the resident or group. So sometimes, let's just say we've got a resident group who says that they want to have a shrimp dinner every Tuesday night. And the facility might say, we're not going to do that because there's too many people that have allergies to shrimp, or that's just not within our budget we can take it into consideration and do it every now and then, but we cannot do that every Wednesday night. We do not have the budget to be able to do that. And they would respond as such. They don't have to do it just because the residents say they want to see it. So let's talk a little bit about what that meeting should look like. These meetings need to occur once a month. That is designated by the state regulations. So every month, these meetings must occur. The meeting space must be private, and there shouldn't be any distractions, nor the ability for staff to come in unless they are invited. Now, this can sometimes get difficult for places because privacy for large group meeting spaces can be difficult in some facilities, especially facilities that have gone to a town hall kind of a concept where there are no doors anymore to make that space more attractive for people to be able to use. But you do need to still, the facility is still tasked with trying to make that private. I've been in buildings like this, and one of the things that we've done, I've seen happen is signs will be put up that say, private meeting occurring, please do not stop, please continue moving. Things along that regard. Or they have a staff, or they might station a staff person there that the facility, that the residents have agreed could be in that meeting, to be there to tell people to please keep moving and not to stick around this area because private meeting is occurring. So know that they have to be private. And this makes sense because this is that opportunity for people to feel that their voice can be listened to. But not all the time does everyone want their face affiliated with their voice if they've got something that they're very concerned about and they're afraid that they don't really want to bring it up. So that's why this meeting, it needs to be private. And that's really an important piece to all of this. At a minimum, there should be a president and a vice president for every resident council, or it could be a chairperson and a vice chairperson. So that's, again, we must have that. And facilities can struggle with getting a president sometimes and a vice president, especially if it's a facility that focuses in on rehab and rehab only. This can be difficult to do, but you need to be continuously seeking out a president and a vice president to fulfill those roles. If for any reason you cannot fulfill one of those roles, you still need to be seeking that out on a continuous basis, and you need to continue to be revisiting it. You just can't take it as a one and done sort of opportunity. You need to keep seeking that out and documenting that every month that you have been seeking out a president and you cannot find one. And I do have some strategies that I like to use for recruiting that president or vice president. One of the things that I've done in the past is I have given a list of responsibilities for the president, a list of responsibilities for the vice president, so that the person knows exactly what it is that they're stepping into. Sometimes this can help people feel a little bit more comfortable in that role so they can understand exactly what it is that will be their responsibilities. And so that might just be a hint of what you may ask for from your facility. The meeting should be ran by the residents. It needs to be ran by the residents. I'm going to say it one more time. The meeting should be ran by the residents. This is not a meeting that should look like the staff member in the front of the room and they are running the agenda. It should be ran by that president. That is the president's role. They should be taking that agenda, the president, and going through the agenda. The staff can be there to assist, but they should not be running that meeting. This is a resident meeting ran by them. Again, to stress, the staff can only participate in these meetings with the invitation of the residents. So one of the things that I've done in the past is to do a blanket statement. If the residents would really like the facility liaison to be at every meeting, because many times they can be the person to help take those minutes, then you could go ahead and you could vote that in at the very beginning, and you could just revisit that vote. So you don't, and have them sign off, the president of the meeting of the council, sign off on a sheet that says the residents of blah, 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 nursing facility agree that the activity director, blah, 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 can attend our meetings through the invitation of the residents. So that's something that you can do on an ongoing basis. There should also be an opportunity for open dialogue about the facility. So there should always be that on the agenda for the meeting, that people have the opportunity to be able to speak what they want to speak and share what they want to share. Minutes should be taken that reflect what actually happened during the meeting, and these should be posted or made available to the residents. And what actually happened, I have viewed meeting minutes in the past, and sometimes facilities can get have a little trepidation in putting in there some of the complaints that they're hearing from the residents, because they don't want it to reflect badly on the facility. Well, my advice to the facilities is put in those concerns and then show what you did about it to remedy that situation. There's nothing better than to show to people that the residents said that they didn't like the way the mealtime was happening. We took that under advice. We asked them what they wanted to see, and we made the following changes based upon the recommendations from the residents. That is really powerful to see for those who don't work in that facility who are reviewing those minutes. So do make sure that what's happening in those minutes and those meetings are actually reflected in those minutes. And one of the things that I, again, like to see personally, this is just a personal thing, is for those minutes to be reviewed. If they're being written by the staff member, for instance, who is attending that meeting, then for the resident council president to review those minutes and to sign off on those minutes to say that they have agreed to what is reflected in the minutes actually is what happened in the meeting. And then they need to be posted and made available. You could do this in a variety of ways. You could have a resident council bulletin board where that gets placed. You could go ahead and run copies of it and give it to residents. You could do it in a variety of different ways. But it's important for people who couldn't make the meeting or who didn't want to attend the meeting to see what's happening in the meeting. And it's also important for those that are coming in to the facility to see that these meetings are occurring and that these residents that live in your building have open dialogue for what's occurring. That can be a really powerful thing for people to see. When you are taking those minutes, you should not put people's names in those minutes because, again, that confidentiality, that privacy issue. You can just say it was brought to our attention by a resident. So you do not need to put unless the person wants their name in the minutes. I recommend that you do not put people's names into those minutes for privacy issues. The concerns or grievances should be acted upon and reported back to the council. Again, you saw this reflected in the federal regulations, and it's also reflected in the state regulations as well. These concerns and grievances need to be acted upon. So they have to be put forth. I do recommend that a reporting form gets used where that grievance gets written out, and then it's asked of the person who's most responsible for that grievance area to give that response back written out as the federal regulations say, so that can be reported back to the resident council as a whole at the next meeting. So we shouldn't just get the grievances and write out, get the report back about what's going to be done about it, and then never talk about it again. It should be brought back up to the next meeting so the residents can see that what they had a concern or a grievance about was actually acted upon. And if it's a long-term thing, for example, let's say it's too hot in the building in the summertime and you're working on the air conditioning system, then that should be reflected in those minutes. That the facility is working on the air conditioning service and will continue to report on this until it has been corrected. Subcommittees can also be developed or evolved based upon the resident need or desire. And these subcommittees can look like a food committee. It could look like a event planning committee. It can look like a welcome committee where new people are welcomed into the facility by a group of residents. It could be a variety of different subcommittees. So what shouldn't it look like? It shouldn't look like all department heads are in attendance unless they're invited by the residents. And I have seen resident council meetings where they do want to see all department heads because they want their concerns addressed immediately, or they want to make sure that all department heads are hearing from them what they want to see. But you really need to make sure that all the residents that are in that meeting want it to proceed like this, because that can also stifle people from being able to speak up. The example could be, let's say I live in a long-term care facility, and I am not liking one of the activities that they're doing once a week, but I love the activity director. And now here she's in the meeting, and I really do like her a lot, but I'm just not liking the way this activity is playing out, and nobody's enjoying it. We've been talking about it at lunch, but I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to hurt the activity director in front of all the other department heads. So I don't want to bring it up in the meeting, and I don't want to bring it to her personally, but I do want her to know. So that's why we don't want all department heads sitting in a meeting, unless if the residents want it. It's staff member running the meeting and doing most of the talking. If your meeting looks like that, where you have a staff member who it's her meeting or his meeting, and they're doing all the talking, that's not what it should be looking like. This is not a meeting to just get through doing it once a month. It really needs to be this productive meeting. And I'm going to give you some hints on that even further in a minute. It shouldn't look like the minutes not reflecting the conversation of the meeting. If they don't contain concerns or grievances that are brought up, then we're not doing the minutes properly. We really want to make sure that those concerns and grievances are brought up. And then we also want to make sure that they do get acted upon. I mean, it's the resident's home, it's all of your home. And we want to make sure that you have those abilities to have things that you want to see changed, just as you would in your own home. And it should not just be this report of activities for, I'm sorry, there's a typo there, for the month. It should not just be that. I've also have witness meetings where it becomes an activity meeting. So it's really like an activity planning meeting, and it's really not a resident council meeting because they're not talking about everything, the building collectively as a whole. So it shouldn't just be this meeting where we talk about what's happening. That can be a part of the agenda of the meeting, but that's not what the meeting should look like singularly. So some tips to make the meeting more successful. Let's talk about this. That design of the meeting. So there's really two styles that we talk about, a town hall style or a resident representative style. A town hall style design of the meeting would look like where everybody's invited to the meeting. Everybody can come down to that meeting at each month. And it's just a room filled with people, and the president leads that meeting. And people would raise their hand and say their concerns and contribute to the meeting. Or the other way it could look is a resident representative style. And what this looks like is it could be for that building that has like 300 people in it, let's say. And having 300 people in a room can be a lot of people to be able to run an effective meeting. So instead, a resident representative style would be where there's meetings done on every floor. And that representative runs that meeting. And they get the concerns of the people who live on that floor, and then they bring it to the resident council meeting, which is a smaller meeting of just the representatives as well as the president and anyone else that gets invited to that meeting. Sometimes this can work effectively for those larger buildings. It's important if you do that style that resident representative is really representing the entire floor and not just themselves. I've seen people do it in that manner, and it becomes where you've got 5 people because there's 5 floors in the facility, and it's just 5 people talking about what they want, not what they are, the other people on their floor or the complaints and concerns and the compliments that they have. Another suggestion is to establish bylaws for the council, or another word could even be a policy for the council. What is the purpose of it? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? What does it look like for our building? That helps give that continuity to the meeting in case of staff members leave, in case of resident council presidents change over. It helps make sure that that meeting stays intact in that quality manner that you've established. The other thing is to make sure you have a set agenda. All meetings run really much better when you've got an agenda that's set. So some things that you can include on that agenda would be facility updates. We're putting in a new TV system. We're going to be painting this wing. We're going to be redoing the floors, things like that. And this is important. Remember, it is our home. I mean, I've been in nursing homes where residents, all of a sudden their floor is being painted and they had no clue that their floor was going to get painted. Well, it's nice to have that known to you before your floor winds up becoming a little bit of havoc and strangers are coming up all day because the floor is being painted. Introduction of new staff members. This is a great place to new CNAs, new housekeeping, new administrators, everybody that's new to the facility. It's a great way for the residents to get to know who that person is, as well as for that staff member to get connected to the people that they are serving on a day-to-day basis. I think it's also can be fun for the staff member to share a little bit about who they are, so that, again, the residents feel more connected and more comfortable with somebody who is who's working in their home. Other things to include involvement in the quality assurance process of the building. So as a FYI, part of what the facilities are tasked with doing is they're tasked with doing quality assurance and process improvement. And part of that requirement says that they need to be looking to the residents and involving the residents in on this process. The resident council meeting can be a prime opportunity to do that. They can share the initiatives that they're working on. The facility can share the initiatives that they're working on for quality assurance, what they're doing, and then ask the residents, what other ideas do you have for us to help us moving forward with this quality initiative? And now we've brought everybody together working on the same thing at the same time. It can also include guest speakers. So you can bring people in to talk about hospice. You could bring people in to talk about the Ombudsman program. The Ombudsmen are always willing to come in and talk to the resident council meetings about a variety of different topics. Talk with your Ombudsman for your facility to find out different topics that they could talk to your group about. Another thing to know is there is a piece of the regulation that also says that there needs to be a community liaison. And by that, they mean somebody that is involved in the community. So if I live in Palos Heights, Illinois, that there would be somebody, and the facility is housed in Palos Heights, Illinois, that there would be somebody from Palos Heights that would be the liaison, because our home is in that community. And in the past, I have actually even seen the chief of police be that liaison. But an easy fix for many to fill that role can even be your ombudsman. Your ombudsman can become the facility liaison. I mean, not the facility liaison, the community liaison, because they can help represent the community in those meetings. It's also a great opportunity to talk about residents' rights. I have seen resident council meetings where they focus in on one right and explain that right fully to people at every meeting. So that gives the facility the opportunity for 12 times through the course of the year, if we're doing it every month, the resident council meeting every month, it gives the opportunity to really take a deep dive into what to the right that they're focusing in on that month, so that the residents can really understand what those rights mean and really talk about it. It's also that opportunity to bring in the concerns of any of the resident members, of any of the members and of the residents. So there is those concerns. But I also do want to say it's also an opportunity for the residents to compliment staff in the facility as well. I always do think that there's opportunity that when we need to look, if we're looking at the bad, we should also take a look at what's going good. And many times when we provide people with compliments, it gives them more energy to work on some of those things that I have concerns about in the building as well. And those compliments should be genuine compliments, not just a compliment for the sake of giving that compliment. So know that it is that opportunity to be able to give compliments and concerns to the members of the members of the residents, to move those forward to the facility administration. And lastly, response to the previous concerns. And those concerns should not disappear off the agenda until they have been fully addressed. Because that is then a check and balance for the facility to make sure that they are truly meeting the needs of those who live there. And the other tip to make your meeting successful is the Ombudsman's office has put together a resident council toolkit. And again, I'm going to drop that link into the chat bar as soon as I finish talking here. And this is a dynamite tool. It can really be really helpful. All resident council presidents should take a look at this so to help guide you through. Within the content of this resident council toolkit are a variety of different things. And I think I have that on the next slide. Nope, I don't. But I want to let you know that the resident council toolkit includes in on it the complaint form, a sample agenda, a sample on how to take the minutes, sample bylaws are in there. as well as the residents' rights. So they could be used to help guide during that conversation if you're going to be putting that as part of your agenda. And then we also do have a resident council toolkit that's geared for staff members, for that facility liaison, to help them make sure that they're doing the meeting to the best of their abilities. And again, I will be dropping that link into the chat as well. So if you're a resident council president, I want to really encourage you to get your hands on that. This is also a tool that you can ask your ombudsman for your facility for, and they will be able to get you one and hand it to you physically if you would like a physical copy of this. And that goes for the staff as well as for the residents. So with that, we're going to go ahead and open up for any questions, any comments, any ideas, any best practices that people are seeing that they actually do that makes their meeting dynamite. So first of all, I want to start with the chat. Do we have any questions? I'm not sure if, Stephen, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Okay, do we have any questions in the chat? I see Jessica has her hand raised. Do you want to say something, Jessica?
No, I never put it down from your question earlier. Sorry, Lee.
Oh, that's okay. Stephen, are there any questions in the chat?
Yeah, so we had a question. I always put residents' names in the minutes to show who attended. Should I not even do that? You stated no names for any grievances, but what about attendance?
You can put that on your attendance records. That's what I always recommend. You need to be keeping records of attendance as an activity director if you're the one. And if you're the facility liaison is not the activity director can still put that in to their on their attendance record. Does that answer that question? Whoever answered that, whoever asked that question. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
She said yes, thank you.
Okay, great, great. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think what you were saying at that point was not so much that you shouldn't have a name, but it provides a forum. So a name's not needed when you present a grievance because it could be presented from the group as a whole. Not that it's bad to have a name, it's just not necessary because it's coming from the council as a group.
Right, because not everybody's comfortable in having their name publicly saying Joe Schmo complained about the food. Not everybody's comfortable with that. And then that gets posted on the bulletin board. So not everybody's comfortable with that. So that's where that comes from.
Looks like we have a question from Deborah Willage. Sorry if I butchered your name.
You did a great job with my name. What happens if the building does not respond to your concerns?
Great question. So one of the things right off the top of my head, I'm going to say, make sure you contact your ombudsman because the ombudsman can help process through that with you. I don't know, Deborah, if you've ever used the ombudsman before, but that can be a really great resource. And you're the resident, so you really need to have that conversation and say, this is my home, I live here, and this is really concerning to me. And Stephen, Jessica, any other ombudsman on this that have any other suggestions for this? Anybody who works?
Yeah, so two other things that if you've brought up a concern in resident council and it's not being addressed, that next month when they're reading through the minutes of the last meeting, make sure that concern is in the minutes. And then make sure that it's brought up again when you get to old business saying that this still hasn't been resolved. And, from there, call the ombudsman, call the, file a grievance. There should be a formal grievance process in at least skilled nursing facilities. The point is to make sure that it's documented that this issue was brought up and it's not being resolved. Because surveyors, when they come in and are going through the minutes, they're going to be looking for those sorts of things.
Stephen, that's a great point. They do
Are you still on?
when resident counts, so when the surveyors when the surveyors come into the building, one of the first things they always ask for is the resident council minutes. It's a great way for those Illinois Department of Public Health survey team to get a feel for what is important to the people who live there. So that is something that they always ask for. So what can happen though, sometimes, honestly, as somebody who have worked in this path for over 35 years, sometimes those minutes don't reflect the concerns then that people brought up, because the facility knows that they're going to be asked for by the state when they come in. And whenever I've always encouraged facilities, be honest, because it's going to come out no matter what. So put it into the minutes, but then act upon it. And make sure that you're putting the resolution of what it is that you did. And now you're being trustworthy, as well as you're showing that you truly are listening to the people who live there. And I think that's a really important message then that gets sent. People were concerned that the food was cold, and by golly, we're working on it. We're trying to figure out how to make sure that that food stays warm from kitchen to the table. And we've worked on trying to, maybe our steam tables, making sure that our steam tables are properly working because we're using that method. Maybe it's once they get to the floor, they're sitting out on the table, or maybe it's just that we're putting the plate out and the person isn't at their table yet. So we need to look at some of our practices to see what it is that we're doing. And it gives facility an opportunity to get that deeper understanding about what's really truly playing out for people who live there. Did we get to answer your question, Deborah?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, and then when your question is answered, if you could make sure to lower your hand, that would be very helpful. And it looks like Joseph has a question.
Yeah, hello, I'm at the Veterans Home in Manteno. I don't know if you guys are speaking from other facilities, but I'm actually the president of our resident council here. Of course, we haven't been meeting very much because of the COVID, and it's a good thing, you know, we're having these meetings. It's just that unfortunately we can't have too many. We haven't had too many because of the COVID, and it's hard to get the information sometimes through people. And my question would basically be just to, sorry about that. You know, okay, we've been trying to reach out to the other members here at all. Of course, or is this is kind of a new thing, just having these meetings every month or so?
Yes, Joseph, we're doing these meetings twice a month. And as a resident council president, it's dynamite that you're attending these meetings. I'm wondering if we got other resident council presidents on the call as well. And there's a couple of things that I want to address. One is, so I believe, were we emailing each other earlier today? Email me.
My email is Gmail, Joseph F 9153.
Okay, because I had an email from a Joseph earlier today, and yeah. You can bring together people. I think there even are some facilities that have brought people together to listen to this, to be a part of this meeting. That's something that you can do.
I did try to bring Diane. I can't remember her last name. She's an ombudsman out here. That came to visit us here at this facility, and I invited her. I don't think she's on the meeting here. I didn't see her name, you know, but you know, I'm trying to get, you know, mentioned. And my sister Mary, who's, you know, she's on here somewhere.
Great.
Mary Scampini. So she may have some questions and stuff. But yeah, it's a good idea. We've had these kind of virtual meetings. In fact, we've had them last year. We had one because of COVID, where we were in the Veterans Hall and the staff was in another part of the building, and we had questions and answers or whatever. We tried to, you know, speak our mind. That's what we do. That's what we're allowed to do.
I want to make sure that everybody is aware that currently the way it does depend on the COVID positivity that's happening in your facility, but we should be opening up more, doing the social distancing and making sure people are not in lockdown still, that we can have the opportunity to come together for a resident council meeting. And even if that could look, it may need to be adapted where you may go to that representative style where the different one person from every wing comes to represent that wing or floor of the facility. But to still come together, because these meetings really are, to me, it's one of the most important things that can happen every month. It's the place where, as somebody who lives in the facility, gets that voice, is able to articulate what they're feeling about things, as well as give those opportunities for the facility to continue to do better. And I think that that's important for facilities to hear.
Yeah, we need it, and we need to get a lot more open dialogue on this.
And Diane is on here. I want you to know, Joseph, Diane just put out there that she's on the call as well. So she was able to make our meeting.
So Lee, we've got a few other questions that have come in, and and Deborah, I see you there. I want to go to the chat here real quick, because Lee, something you touched on was how do we do resident council when we have a COVID outbreak? What a lot of facilities are doing that I've seen is it's usually the activities director of social services, whoever is running the meeting, whatever staff liaison there is going door to door and asking questions and then reading rights. I see that quite a bit in facilities, and that should be documented like a resident council meeting. And it needs to be noted that this was a door-to-door resident council due to COVID. Another facility, it's actually the Veterans Home here in Quincy. They do they do WebEx meetings. Now, it's not perfect, and it has its own set of issues trying to get a bunch of people on at once, but it does allow the council to meet even during outbreaks. So those are a couple of options available to people. Deborah.
I also want to give that suggestion about doing it as the representative style.
Yes.
Where, like I just talked about, because, and then you might only be bringing together 4 people into the room, which you could socially distance very effectively that way, and still feel that you're getting everybody's voice listened to. That might be. And Jessica, do you have another suggestion? I see that.
Yeah, one other idea was hallway meetings. So everyone would stay in their doorway and not go out into the hallway, but yet there was still communication, but people were more physically distanced that way. So that was another way. So it wasn't necessarily the whole facility coming together, but rather than one-on-one, it would be a wing or a hallway who was able to have a meeting at a time.
Great idea. Great idea. So the message being, don't stop these meetings because of COVID. Try to and brainstorm it. If you can't figure out a way, this is also another opportunity to talk with your ombudsman and brainstorm it with them. You know, we're here as a resource. Like Stephen shared, Stephen is the regional ombudsman for the Quincy area. And right there, he shared what he's been seeing. And that's one of the pieces that we do as ombudsman. We go to so many different buildings that we can see a variety of different things that are happening. And we can share those and help facilities be able to do it maybe differently.
Deborah, are you ready with your question?
Yes. This is my first meeting, so I just have a simple question. Senior buildings or independent living facilities, do these same rules apply?
So if you're living in an independent senior apartment, then these rules don't apply, and you're going to have to go back to your lease agreement and see what it says about a resident group.
And Deborah, you can always organize, as a person who lives in the facility, you could get some other people together to organize a similar to what, like a condo association type of meeting. And you can organize something like that, because independent living doesn't have the rules.
I mean, these are, I'm talking like CHA senior building, or, you know, HUD. So I'm wondering if these rules apply, but they don't. Because they have resident council as well, so you're using the same language.
Okay, and that's what can happen, is that same language you can't use. The principles behind what it is that we're saying, if you are a person, I don't know who the resident council president is for the particular building that you live in, but you can ask for these things to be the way it gets ran as the people who live there. You can use this as a model. So you can get that toolkit and still use it as a model for your meetings.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
You're welcome. The regulatory side doesn't exist to make them do it that way, but if the demand exists, I would feel that people then want to respond to that demand.
Okay, thank you.
So going back to the chat, we have a question. You said everyone has to be invited to attend resident council. Is that true for assisted living facilities?
So assisted living facilities do not have the guidance affiliated with resident council. So they don't even have to do a resident council meeting, assisted livings. It's similar in that regard from what Deborah was just sharing. They're not mandated to do resident council. Is it a best practice? Absolutely. Do many assisted livings do them? Yes, I see many assisted livings having resident council meetings. And that just shows how valuable those really are. So the regulations do not exist around anything in this regard, which is a little bit of a shame. I wish there was some regulatory guidance behind that. But again, this can really be an opportunity to use the tools that exist to help make that meeting be more meaningful, because I do see that a lot of assisted living meetings do start to look like a facility ran meeting and not a resident run meeting. And I think it's imperative to really get that message across that this is a resident run meeting and not a staff run meeting. That's very important.
Yeah, so the short answer is they're not required to, but they should. You know, they should hold resident council, and they should be inviting everyone, so it really is a resident council. We had another person ask, do ombudsmen need to be invited to the meeting as well? I can take that one.
Yes.
That one's easy. Yes, ombudsmen need to be invited to the meeting. A lot of times for me, when I'm planning out my visits, I'm going to plan a visit for the day of resident council. And, you know, sometimes I get the chance to meet with the resident council president beforehand. Sometimes I'm walking into the room where the meeting is being held and saying, hey, do you mind if I have a seat? So it doesn't have to be, you know, a formal written invitation, just hey, come in, sit down. But we do need that invitation.
And it does, I think it's a very positive thing to have a resident council. It's not a regulation that the ombudsman attend the meetings. I think it would be to everybody's advantage that the ombudsman is in attendance at those meetings, because they can also then reflect upon those minutes and make sure that's what's happened in the meeting is actually what was reflected in the minutes. And then also to be there to help push along any of those concerns that people may want to see addressed. And just by saying that word concerns also does bring me to the place of compliments as well. And I know I mentioned that when I was sharing the slides. I also feel that Resident Council Forum is a wonderful opportunity to extend that thank you and that compliment to that staff member or to that department that is doing a nice, that you feel has really done a great job or really responded to something that you wanted or needed. It just makes people, you know, part of that is it just makes people feel good. And I think that at this point in life, everybody needs some feeling good with everything that's happening in the world. Jessica, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, but I lost it, so it's okay.
Well, and I just, that happens to me all the time. Oh, you got it?
I do, yeah. I just wanted to clarify, back to the question you were answering, Stephen, about do ombudsmen have to be invited? When I used to work as an ombudsman going in the field before I was in my current position, and it would vary from facility to facility. So there were some buildings where the way their resident council operated is that the resident council president would invite me and then open the meeting and introduce me. There were other buildings where before they let anybody into the room who wasn't a resident, they would actually vote. So they would vote as a group to determine whether or not I, acting as the ombudsman, could join that meeting, or someone else who might be a special guest that day could join the meeting. So the regulations don't specify how that's supposed to happen. So it looks different in different places. But what is important and is specified is that it's the residents' meeting. It's not the ombudsman's meeting. It's not the facility staff meeting. It's no one's meeting except for the residents.
Yes. And on that note, it's important to know that you can revoke the permission at any time. So if you're going through the meeting and something comes up that you're really not comfortable sharing in front of, you know, Mr. Smith's grandson or whomever, or maybe there's an issue with the staff liaison that you want to bring up, but you don't want to bring it up in front of them, you can ask that person to leave and hold the meeting, and then let them know if you're going to bring them back in later or not. So I want to note that we are getting down to time, but we still have a few questions left. So I'm gonna try and get through them as quickly as possible. So let's see. I had it and I lost it. So I found it. Lee, can you discuss the right to self-determination, i.e. the right to risk?
Okay, well, everybody has the right to make what some other people might think are poor decisions. Things that I choose for myself may not be something that Stephen's going to need to choose for himself. And it may not be necessarily in my best interest to make that decision. To be honest with you, I had 2 pieces of chocolate before this meeting. I'm trying to lose weight. Was that the smartest thing I just did? No, but I had the right to do that. No one could tell me I couldn't do that. I had the right to be able to do that. And that's just a silly little thing, but that's just kind of explains exactly what all that means, is I have the right to make choices for me. And someone else may not agree with my choice, but I still have the right to make that choice as a person who lives in a long-term care facility, and basically as a person who lives in our country. So that does not disappear just because you move into a long-term care facility. Stephen, do you have anything further to say about that?
Yeah, it was a few years ago, I had a resident, the facility had called me because they were going to issue her an involuntary discharge for non-payment. And the resident had been placed in the nursing home because she kept falling, and the fire department said, you really need to put her in a nursing home, because they were having to come and help her get up. And I went and talked to her, and she wanted to go home, and she insisted on it. And when I asked, when I was talking with her about it, you realize that it's probably safer for you to be in the nursing home. She started talking about her husband. Well, I brought the conversation back around a couple of times, and finally I asked her, I realized her husband had passed away, and I asked her, where did your husband pass at? And she said, the living room. It didn't matter that she would live longer in the nursing home. It didn't matter that she would get good care in the nursing home, hopefully good care. What mattered to her was being where her husband was, which was at home.
Mm-hmm. Yes. This is how ombudsmen operate. We operate, and I'm sorry, sometimes we get called the crazy people because we're advocating for decisions that people have made for themselves. And it may not even be a decision that I'm personally comfortable with because I wouldn't want it for myself. But as an ombudsman, I still have to advocate for that person. And my opinion means absolutely positively nothing. And I will never bring my opinion into it. All I will do is advocate for you for what you desire. That's the reason why ombudsmen exist. Just to make sure it's listened to.
Yeah, so Lee, I see we've got a comment by Julie, and Mark Willage has a question, but before we get to those, Lee, could you give a plug for our next meeting?
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen. This is commercial time. So our next meeting is on February 22nd. And we're actually going to be talking about family councils. And we know that's something that doesn't exist as much. And they can be a great tool, a great mechanism. Jessica, who has helped us with this conversation today, will be presenting on that for us. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation because this is a great idea. It's something that all facilities should afford the opportunity for anybody to start one up. And we're going to talk about what that looks like and how you would go about getting one happening. So that's what we're going to be talking about, 3 o'clock on February 22nd. Be there or be square.
Thanks, Lee. Mark, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, I kind of put the essence of the. I'm getting an echo. I'm sorry.
I can ask your question if. So, how does a resident who wishes to switch to community care, but still feels stifled by the facility or even their family, get this desire acted upon? It's a little off the topic of the resident councils, but that is something I think you need to talk with, probably talk with social services about. Go to them first. And if they're still not acting on it, then call your local ombudsman.
And we can help. And Stephen, great advice. When it comes to anything, we really should go to the facility first and talk to them. And the ombudsman then are there to support. And if you want the ombudsman to go with you to have that conversation, it can also look like that. Mm-hmm. If there's any other questions, we can go ahead. We always stay on until last man standing, basically. But what we like to do is I'm going to be launching this poll. If you can please answer the poll. Did it launch, Stephen?
I don't see it. Oh, there it is.
Okay, if you could please answer this poll. There's actually 2 questions. We've upped it to 2 questions. How beneficial the meeting is. And then you can sing, it says single choice. Oh, I guess we can only answer 1. I thought we could check all. But to select what brings you to this conversation today, what role do you perceive yourself as attending this meeting today? So if you can go ahead and complete that for us, and we will be staying on. I will go ahead though, and I'm going to just end the recording right now. And I want to thank everybody, and I look forward to seeing everybody at our next meeting, but we'll be staying on.